So as she said, my name is John Beaubien. I'm 32 and I live in Arizona. And I was going to start off with a little bit of history, how I found out about my muscular dystrophy and what that looked like. So that started for me back in high school. I was in advanced weight training and I was trying to run the mile and I could only jog, and I just thought I was out of shape. And so I just worked harder. And I noticed all the people around me, all my friends were able to build a lot more muscle than I was able to do. And after high school, I was planning on joining the military. And when I did that, I went through all the testing, and I got to a point where they said, okay, stand on your toes, and I couldn't do that. And then they said, okay, we'll do the duck walk, and that's where you like crouch down and you try to walk like that, and I couldn't do that either. And they were looking at my legs and they were freaking out because they're like, oh my gosh, you have no calf muscles. What's wrong with you? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Then they had their main doctor come in and he's like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. You can't join the military. So at that point I was a little freaked out. And so I went and sought out a neurologist, a neurospecialist, and he just did a couple little tests and, pricked my toes a couple times. He's like, can you feel that? Can you feel this? Just a couple basic tests. And at the end, he's like, yeah, you've got hereditary neuropathy and you'll never walk again. And I'm like, I was really upset about that, obviously. And later on, I got to thinking, that can't be right because I'm walking now, just not as well. And eventually I went to go see a neuromuscular specialist, supposedly the best in Arizona, Dr. Siva Kumar, who was like the head of the Barrows Institute at the time. And he did a whole barrage of tests and finally said, okay, I think you have Miyoshi myopathy, and it's really rare, so I'd like to have you come in and meet with all of my understudies to understand, so they can diagnose other people with rare types of muscular dystrophies. So I did that. It was like 15 people all asking me kinds of questions, and none of them got it. So it was kind of weird. He put my muscle slide up on the board and was teaching. It was like classroom. So that's my experience in the beginning with all of that. Once I found out I had Miyoshi myopathy, I was kind of bummed and depressed for several years, and I've kind of felt alone. So, I was kind of like, why me? How come everybody else can do this? So I was looking for other people that had Miyoshi myopathy, and I checked in with the MDA first, Muscular Dystrophy Association, and at first they didn't see me in their books or something as Miyoshi myopathy as a muscular dystrophy. And I called again later and they're like, oh yeah, it's in the rare section. But I'm kind of glad that I did contact that resource because later on I did get to utilize their resource to get toe-off braces so that I could walk easier. It made life a lot easier. I had more balance. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of this presentation is that this is all about seeing the future, planning, and using all the resources available to you. And it's not always that easy. You can't just get things handed to you. You actually have to reach out, find these resources, and utilize them and follow all the steps that they give you in order to get those resources. So with MDA, that part of it was pretty easy to get that funding to pay for the orthotics, I think that's what they're called, for my legs, and that was through Hanger Clinic. And later on, I also, when I was depressed and lonely, I tried to start a support group through MDA, but they they had very specific groups with different types of muscular dystrophies, and since this was so rare, they didn't have any groups. And so I was like, well, I want to start my own group. And they're like, well, you have to have a master's degree to start a group. And so I was really bummed at that too. So then I decided I'm going to make my own group. And I went to the public library and I put up flyers and I contacted ABLE, which is a Center for Independent Living, because they had a newsletter that went out to people with disabilities. And I said, okay, well, can I put something in your newsletter? And they said, sure. And I kept going to the library to try to see if anybody showed up for the meeting, and unfortunately nobody did. I kept trying to do more outreach to doctors' offices and stuff and didn't have any luck. Eventually, doing searches online, I did find a Yahoo group, which turns out there was a lot of people on there, and I think Brad was the head of it. And then later found out that there was a Facebook group too. The Facebook group that I found was Limb Girdle, which I thought, it's similar, just a whole bunch of different types of limb girdle. And that's what I did for that piece of it. Eventually it got to a point where like every year is like having a new disability or having a new challenge. And things started to get harder and harder. And I'm sure everyone hears at different points in their own lives where it's affecting you in a different way. And for me, it seemed like every year just things changed. And my family and friends kept saying, you should get a handicap plaque. It'll make things easier for you. And I let my pride get in the way. And I think a lot of us, I've talked to a lot of people, varying disabilities, and they just let their pride get in the way of getting the technology and the resources that they need in order to better enjoy life. I couldn't find any parking spaces up at the front of the grocery store, and I'm like, I don't need a plaque. I'll just, I'll walk in there and get all my stuff and hang it on the cart at the end of the day or at the end of the grocery shop. And I'm like, oh God, this is killing me. And I finally said, okay, I'm going to apply for a handicap plaque. So I went to the DMV and I went through all the steps and I contacted my doctor and got the paperwork showing that I had a reason to have that plaque. And then I got the plaque and things were much easier. I could park towards the front and I didn't have to do as much walking. But over time it was getting harder and harder. Even with the leg braces, I was at like events or parties and I'm standing there and my legs are just killing me. And my family and friends are like, well, you should try to get a wheelchair. And I'm like, no, I don't need that. But eventually I did get a wheelchair, a manual wheelchair, and it improved things much better for me because I could go to these events. And actually, I got this wheelchair really easily at I think it was called, I can't remember the store, but basically I was able to buy a fairly new chair, manual wheelchair, at low cost because it was used. And I was able to enjoy events more. I didn't focus on my legs and I was like, oh, I'm going to fall, I need to leave. So it kind of gave me a little bit of freedom, but not quite enough freedom because people sometimes, my arms would get tired pushing the thing and my family or friends are pushing me around. They'd stop and they'd have a conversation behind me and I didn't like that so much either. And eventually I worked my way to get a power chair. Before I get into that piece of it though, friends and family did suggest that I should apply for Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. That's insurance that's there for you if you've worked and you have a work history, then you're paying into the system, and essentially that's your retirement benefit that you're getting when you get onto those benefits. And so I did eventually apply for that too, and I went through a long process at the Social Security office showing my work history and all my documents showing I had a type of muscular dystrophy, and eventually I got onto that. And it did help financially at the time when I wasn't really working that much. with the power wheelchair, I eventually, since I got on SSDI, I was able to get Medicare after a couple of years, and that helped in getting the power chair that I needed because they paid for about 80% of my power chair. That was a long process in itself. I had to submit a bunch of paperwork through through the agency that helped to get the wheelchair and fit me for the wheelchair. And it took a long time to get the wheelchair, and I had to follow up with them several times to say, what's the holdup? And like, well, we sent the paperwork over to your doctor, but it hasn't been filled out, it hasn't come back to us. So I had to do back and forth with the doctor and the Medicare insurance. And they're like, well, we'll pay for 80% of it, and we're not going to pay for the seat elevation piece of it. And I'm like, oh, gosh. I really need that. At the time, I was using the seat elevation to stand up easier. If you're sitting really low, it's hard to get up. So having the seat elevation was a huge benefit because it lowered the gap from seating to standing. And then it turned out that through the insurance that I had through work, Blue Cross, they covered a portion a portion of it, but they too would not cover the seat elevation. And this leads into the next thing, was a really big resource that I found out about through the MDA Quest magazine, Voc Rehab, or Vocational Rehab. I saw in this article in MDA that this guy started his own business, and he decided, well, I want to have a vehicle so that I can use it for work, and I want a ramp so that I could get in there and drive with hand controls. And Voc Rehab paid for that for him. So I decided I wanted Voc Rehab too. I wanted to plan ahead. I knew eventually I was going to need the service. For a long time, I was able to walk with the leg braces, but eventually then did transition to full wheelchair all the time. And I really pursued that hard with Voc Rehab. And they said, okay, well, we can get you this modified van, and I was telling them I want to go to school at the same time. And they said, well, you have to choose. You have to choose work and getting your van mod, or school and no van mod. And I'm like, okay, fine. I broke down and I said, sure, I'll do that. I need to get my van mod. That's the most important thing for me. So I did that with Voc Rehab, and I started an entry-level position as a program aide at Ability 360, formerly known as ABLE. And I worked there for several years, and I bought a van, which they were telling me I had to go through a lot of steps with Voc Rehab to get the services that I needed. So they were telling me, okay, it has to be a new van or a van that's fairly new with this many miles on it. And then, I had to do all this research. Actually, I take that back. Even before I got the van, I had to explain to them why I needed to get a van. So I had to say, okay, well, I live way over here. My job's way over here. And I'd have to take 3 dial-a-rides. It's sort of like a paratransit service in Arizona. And I had to take 3 of those, and there's a 30-minute window waiting each one, and I would get to work late, and it would cost all this money. And then I'd have to leave early from work to get to school get to school on time. And then once I did that, I would be stuck at school at 10 o'clock at night with no way to get home. And I couldn't do the bus because there was no buses near me, several miles away. So after doing all that research, they're like, okay, we'll do the van mod. And that's when I had to do more research and say, okay, well, I found this van. It's this many miles on it. It still has warranty, because they're like, it needs a warranty on there. And then you need to find out whether or not you can cover the insurance to cover all the modifications. If you can't do that, you can't get the van. So I had to do a lot of work, but I'm glad that I did it, because now I've had that van for like 7 years, and I can drive directly from my power chair. It has easy lock, a bolt locks into the floor, and I just snap my seatbelt and I'm ready to go. Drive with hand controls, stop, go. and drive about an hour to work every day and an hour back home. And I've done that for like 7 years now, working full time. And eventually, I worked my way off of the Social Security benefits, because a part of that is you have to report your earnings, and that can become tedious and annoying. And sometimes the Social Security makes mistakes. They probably don't want me saying that. But they do. They make mistakes. And that happened to me, where I reported everything and I wound up with an overpayment of $9,000. And I found out later that the agency that I worked for, it was already too late by the time I started working for them, but they have staff that explain how working affects Social Security benefits, and they could have helped me avoid that problem. There's centers for independent living all over the U.S., and there's Voc Rehab all over the U.S. Voc Rehab is a federal program, and the centers for independent living are paid for by federal money. And the Centers for Independent Living have staff, at least 51% of their staff have disabilities. So they kind of get it. And there's lots of resources available at these different centers. One of them, which I was just explaining, they explain how working affects your Social Security benefits so that you can make it an easier transition and not get an overpayment. So I worked my way off of Social Security benefits, my own personal choice, decided to work full-time, and now I'm completely off of those benefits, and I needed to transition, or I decided to transition off my medical benefits too, from work and from Social Security. There's a program called Medicaid, and it's in certain states. In Arizona, there's a special Medicaid program called Access Freedom to Work, which allows you to go to work and earn like $55,000 a year or $65,000, and it only looks at your income, and you can earn all that money and still have insurance, and it covers a whole bunch of medical expenses. And on top of that, I got another program as part of the Medicaid. It's called Arizona Long-Term Care, and through that, I was able to get do personal care assistance services, which in Arizona, you're allowed to choose a spouse or a loved one to do that. So my wife is my personal care assistant. And so she gets paid to help with all the stuff that she's normally doing, the things that I can't do anymore. The laundry and the cleaning of the house and helping me get ready in the morning. But it's likely that in your states, there might also be personal care assistant services that you could take advantage of as well, where somebody can help you get up in the morning, get ready for work, do all the things that you need to get done so that you can fully live your life and do all the things that you want to do, even recreational things. Through Voc Rehab, I got employment. It just was strange that I kept bumping into Ability 360 over the years. Once when I tried to put in the newsletter for a support group, another time at a vendor table for when I was looking for jobs, and another time when I had Social Security benefits and I had the overpayment, bumped in at Ability 360 those 3 times. And eventually, through an employment agency, through Voc Rehab, I found a job lead at Ability 360, and I started working there. And that's where I came into contact with a lot of these resources that I've been taking advantage of. And Voc Rehab, they make you do a plan in the beginning, all the things that you need. And you can modify that plan over time as your needs continue to grow. And I was like, well, my bathroom's not accessible. And so I'm having a harder time in the tub. I'll slip in the tub and get stuck in there. And so I wanted to do a roll-in shower. So they're like, okay, well, you have to do all this research again, and you have to contact all these people or pick these from a group of agencies to do this. And so I jumped through all the hoops again. It was annoying, and sometimes I felt like I wanted to give up, but I did it anyways. And I had my bathroom modified. And so now I have a roll-in shower with a seat that comes down, and I have a stand aid with my toilet. So I press a a button and the toilet raises up to standing. So I got a lot of these great things, and they also modified my doorways to make the doorways 36 inches so that I could get through the doorways easier. I also utilized home modification program through my agency that I work for, and they cut out the bottom of my sink in the bathroom so I could go underneath it. And I forgot to mention that the personal care assistances also came through my agency that I work for too. And they also have a loan closet. The loan closet, I was able to get a stand-aid so I could do weight bearing on my legs and put more weight on my bones. I also got a grabber that I was able to use, and since they had so many of them, I was able to keep those things. And with Voc Rehab, I had some problems early in where they said I had to choose. Go to work and get your van modified, or go to school. You have to choose. And I found out later through friends at my center that I work at, Center for Independent Living, that I didn't have to choose. And there's this other agency that's in every state, and it's federally funded, that kind of watches over Voc Rehab to make sure they're providing all the services that they can. And so I went to the one in Arizona Center for Disability Law, and they said, no, you didn't have to choose. You could have got your van modified and go to school. You didn't have to make that decision back then. And they were telling me, Voc Rehab was telling me, okay, we're going to close your case. You're done, you're successful, you're working full-time in this entry-level position. You know, you're making entry-level monies. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to do all the things I want to do at that level of income. I want to start a family. I want to get married. I want to buy a house. I want to be successful. I want to move up to the next level, and I want to be a graphic designer. And they're like, well, you had to make that decision a long time ago, and this is what you wanted to do. You wanted to get your van modified. And I was like, well, I want to continue going to school, and you guys knew that was my plan from the beginning. So Arizona Center for Disability Law did a mediation. We met together, and they said, well, at the federal level, it says you are supposed to help a person reach their maximum earning potential. And I wasn't at that level yet. So they're like, okay, you're right. We'll go ahead and do this. So they helped pay for school. And then again, I had to do the research. I had to go interview graphic designers. I had to do a lot of this stuff because they were telling me that it's a saturated field and you're probably not going to get a job. And it's, we basically don't think that you can do it. And so I went out there and I interviewed 3 graphic designers in the field and answered a whole bunch of questions, or had a whole bunch of questions answered. And then I had to go to 3 different schools, ASU and DeVry and the Art Institute. And eventually I chose the Art Institute, just felt like the best fit. And there was a lot of work that I had to do there in between classes. And just to give you an idea, this was a lot of work on my behalf just because I was going to work full-time and I was going to school and I was taking about 3 classes a quarter. A quarter is a lot speedier than a semester. So I was doing that, and that took a lot of my time. Like, I had to go straight from work to school, and it was 10 o'clock, I'd go home, go to bed. So it was busy for many years. And on top of that, as part of the Voc Rehab, I had to work with the financial people there to get Voc Rehab the right information, because it didn't always work. And I had to, with the supply store, I had to talk to the finances to get them to move over the financial piece to the bookstore, the supply store. It was really frustrating. It happened every quarter. I had to fix this problem, and I had to have them report to Voc Rehab and tell them all the stuff I needed and why I needed it in order to get it. And there were many times I'm like, I just want to give up. This is so much work. But in the end, I stuck to it, and I got my bachelor's degree in graphic and web design. And I was able to use that degree where I currently work. A new position opened up for a graphic designer, and I applied for it, and I got it because I was already doing design there on top of my regular job duties. And so that's now what I do, is I do graphic design at the same place. And it's great because I can make those designs and bring more people in with disabilities to get those resources. And I've heard while I was in the programming position there, I heard from a lot of people who talked to Voc Rehab, and they're like, I'm having problems with my counselor, and I just gave up and I closed my case. And it makes me really sad to hear that, because maybe they're having problems with a one VR counselor, and they could have that mediated through the law center in their state to make sure that they provide them the services, or they could easily get a new VR counselor and someone who will work with them to get the services. And yes, you will need to do a little bit of work on your behalf to get things going, but in the end, you're going to be so much better off. I think I forgot to show you guys a few slides here. Got so caught up in talking. Here's me when that's my first power wheelchair, and I still have that van. They gutted the whole thing out and cut everything, like they blowtorched it. I got to watch it. They were blowtorching everything out. And they lowered the floor so that the vehicle, and they raised it up as well so that it could kneel like a bus. And then the ramp comes out. And then I can roll in with the power chair, and there's a bolt on the bottom of my chair that locks into the floor, so then I can drive with hand controls. And they put in zero effort steering in the power steering, so that I can turn the wheel much easier. And I know in the future, potentially my arms might get even more weak, and so I might need to get maybe a joystick. And so I'll have to think about the additional cost there, or what that might be, and how I'm going to cover that in the future. A new challenge. But for now, the zero effort steering, I can still turn the wheel. It can be a little difficult if I'm doing a really hard turn, if I just go a little bit slower on those corners. And this is me in the vehicle, locked into the floor. I just throw the seatbelt on and I'm ready to go. And this is me at my graduation with my two youngsters. This is when I got my bachelor's degree in graphic design. And my two little boys there, Nick and Scott. This is an image from a story they at my work. We've created magazines, disability-related magazines, and I got featured in the magazine. And so I'm right there holding up two of our previous magazines, because I'm the primary designer of the magazine. It's a 60-page magazine focusing on all different types of disabilities and a whole range of different things, from recreation to like going out kayaking to going to work, and just all kinds of topics. It's called Livability. So the chef's hat and the clothes, it's because I like to cook and nutrition, and so they mix the two together. Like they said, I'm always cooking up new designs. And sometimes there are services that are on the chopping block, and you have to do some advocacy. You have to get out there and talk to your legislators and make sure that they know what's important, that a lot of people use with disabilities. And so this is me with a group of my colleagues and other people. Every year there's a NICL conference where all the Centers for Independent Living come from every state, and we do a march to the Capitol, and we talk to the legislators, and we tell them what's important, the things to keep, and the things to bring on. And so here's us on the march to the Capitol. So it's really important to do this, to advocate for yourself when you know something's not right, and to push for it and get involved with other agencies that are going along the same movement. And I'm just going to run through some really quick photos that are kind of fun. This is back when I could still walk, and I was using toe-off braces. Since I had the toe-off braces, I was able to balance myself, and I got those through a resource. And so I went camping with my brother, and I was able to walk better on the terrain and stuff when I went camping. I don't think I would have been able to do that when I went camping. I probably would have stepped on a rock and twisted my ankle, and those kept my legs straight and gave me more stability. There's my wife, Kelly. That's one of our first dates. And we got married. I'm just kind of showing you that when you have a disability, it's not the end. You can live a full and exciting life, especially if you take advantage of the resources and you keep going and you don't give up. And so at the wedding, I still had that kind of pride mentality. I wanted to be up and standing around, so you saw me standing there. And by the end, I was dead tired, and I made sure I had my power chair there so that I could use that when my legs gave out on me. I wanted to show this because it's possible to have kids and make it work. You can still hold your kid there in your lap, and you can still have fun. And eventually, as they get older, our kids, we taught them how to, actually, we didn't even teach them this. They just kind of did it on their own. They started crawling up in my lap. And so now we'll be walking, they're like, Daddy, I want to sit in your lap while we're going. And we still do that. And I think I've got another photo here. Oh, what's coming up. But I was the best man in my friend's wedding. And this is us at Christmas time. And I went to a Comic-Con recently. That was fun. And here's my kids. We went to a Chipotle Cultivate Festival. Family picture, us being goofy. And see, this is the size they're at now, and you can see it's getting a little crowded. But they help me out. They help me hold the umbrella sometimes, or if it's raining, or hold some stuff for me. And then this is us having fun family time, and you can still do fun things. You just have to be creative. So we have these little pipe guns that we shoot like marshmallows, and we had a marshmallow fight. And I went to Las Vegas, and we had fun there. And you just have to do the little research, find out if the hotel is accessible, and find a way to get there, make sure all those are accessible, and plan everything out. Halloween, dressed up as a karate dude. In the Renaissance Festival. And we went to Flagstaff up north in Arizona and played in the snow. And we had a snow fight, my kids won. And travel. Obviously, we're all here. We all did the travel thing. And this is back when I went to the Nickel conference. And we got to see a lot of the different sites when we had a little off time. And I wanted to say that even though I may not be very strong physically, I'm strong because I am looking towards the future and I can see the things that I want to accomplish in my life. And I'm going to do what it takes to get those resources and the things that I need so that I can live a full life, just like I would if I didn't have muscular dystrophy. And I've been able to accomplish all the things that I wanted to do. I got married. I had the kids. I bought a house, which at the time happened to be just only under my name and only under my credit and on my income. And I got the job. I'm doing what I wanted to do for my job. I'm making significantly more than when I started as a program aide because I pushed further with Voc Rehab and they paid for my school. And got the transportation. And most importantly, I have my freedom. I don't feel trapped by the muscular dystrophy. I can go and live my life and do what I want and have fun. And I'm not trapped.